Imagine an ancient valley covered in dry, brittle bones, thousands of them scattered across cracked, barren ground. Suddenly, these bones begin to move, assembling themselves into complete bodies, as flesh and muscle miraculously form before your eyes. This isn't a scene from a horror movie or a sci-fi blockbuster. It's a powerful vision from the Bible, one that holds profound meaning for our lives today. In this video, we'll uncover the mystery behind Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of Dry Bones and what it reveals about hope, restoration, and the seemingly impossible miracles that can unfold in our darkest moments. Could this ancient prophecy hold a key to personal transformation in today's world? If you're ready to dive into this incredible story, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more videos that explore the Bible's most fascinating mysteries and powerful lessons. Drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts, and share this video with friends who might need a dose of hope and inspiration. Ezekiel, a prophet living among his people in exile, stands in the middle of this unsettling landscape. With every glance, he takes in the endless scattering of bones, each one a silent testament to life lost. He feels the weight of this vision bearing down on him, his heart heavy as he surveys the scene. The valley is void of hope, as empty as the eyes of the countless skulls surrounding him, remnants of a story long forgotten. To understand the depth of this vision, we need to step back and see where the people of Israel were. Once a proud nation, they had been conquered, uprooted, and taken far from home. Their temple, once the center of their lives and faith, lay in ruins. They were exiled in Babylon, a foreign land with foreign gods and strange customs. Families had been torn apart, and everything they had known and loved seemed irretrievably lost. They were strangers in a strange land, longing for their homeland, the place God had promised them. This was more than just a geographical separation. For the Israelites, it felt like God Himself had abandoned them. They saw their nation's defeat as a sign of divine rejection. The loss of their land, their temple, and their freedom felt like a sign that God had turned away. Their despair ran deep, as they questioned whether they had any future left, or if they were doomed to remain scattered and broken forever. In this context, the Valley of Dry Bones becomes a powerful symbol of Israel's collective spirit. The scattered bones represent a people who feel utterly defeated, as though all hope and purpose had dried up. Like the valley, their lives felt empty, lifeless, and abandoned. They believed there was no future for them, that God's promises had faded into the past, with no hope of being restored. For many, the thought of renewal or a return to life seemed like an impossibility, a distant dream that would never come to pass. Ezekiel, a prophet living among his exiled people, carried the same weight of sadness and uncertainty. He had witnessed his people suffering, heard their cries, and shared in their longing for home. Despite his calling as a prophet, Ezekiel, too, must have felt the hopelessness of his circumstances. Yet, in the midst of this desolation, something extraordinary happens. One day, Ezekiel senses a powerful presence, as if an unseen hand is upon him. Without warning, the Spirit of God lifts him and carries him away, and in an instant he finds himself standing in the middle of a barren valley. At first, he must wonder why he's been brought here, to this desolate place where the air is thick with silence. All around him are dry bones, scattered across the ground in every direction. It's an unsettling sight, haunting and heavy, as if he's standing in a vast, ancient graveyard where life has long since been forgotten. As he takes in the scene, Ezekiel is struck by the lifelessness around him. These bones have been here for ages, exposed to the sun and wind, stripped of all that once made them human. The scene is a stark reminder of mortality, a reflection of Israel's lost spirit, devoid of the hope that once sustained them. Yet Ezekiel senses that this vision is not just a message of doom. He feels the presence of God growing stronger, filling the air with a sense of purpose. This is not merely a vision of death, it's a calling, a moment where God intends to reveal something profound. Though he stands in a place where everything seems lost, Ezekiel senses that he is about to witness a miracle unlike anything he has ever known, a revelation that will transcend despair and breathe new meaning into the lives of his people. As Ezekiel stands amidst the lifeless bones, trying to comprehend the purpose of this haunting vision, he hears a voice unmistakably filled with authority and power. It is the voice of God, breaking the stillness of the valley. God addresses Ezekiel directly, asking him a question that pierces the silence. "Son of man, can these bones live?" The question seems impossible. Here he is, surrounded by bones that have been lifeless for years, maybe centuries. The bones are beyond decay, brittle and bleached by the sun. To any human understanding, these bones represent the finality of death, the irreversible end of life. By all logic, they cannot live again. But Ezekiel knows he is in the presence of the Almighty, a God whose power defies logic and limitations. In that moment, Ezekiel feels the weight of God's question. It is not simply about the bones before him. It's a challenge to believe in the impossible, to consider that even the most hopeless situations are within God's reach. Instead of responding with doubt, Ezekiel answers with humility and wisdom, saying, "O Lord God, only you know." With these words, he acknowledges that he cannot see a way, but he trusts that God has the power to bring life where there is none. Ezekiel's response is a declaration of faith, a recognition that, while he sees only death and desolation, God's vision extends far beyond what the human eye can perceive. He knows that God's plans often defy the limitations of human understanding, and in this moment he surrenders his own doubts and places his trust in the divine. It is a moment of quiet faith, a simple but profound declaration that even in the most impossible situations, God alone holds the answers. In response to Ezekiel's answer, God gives a command that must have sounded strange, even impossible. "Prophesy to these bones and say to them, 'O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord.'" It's an instruction that defies all logic. Speak to bones, tell them to listen. But Ezekiel understands that when God commands, even the unimaginable can come to pass. So, without hesitation, he steps forward and obeys. Standing alone in that silent valley, Ezekiel begins to speak, his voice carrying across the barren landscape. He calls out to the bones with authority, telling them to hear the words of the Lord. His voice echoes through the stillness, a lone proclamation of life in a place marked by death. The words he speaks are not his own. They are the words God has given him, words infused with divine power. And then, as if answering his words, a sound begins to rise from the valley. It starts as a faint rumble, barely perceptible, but it grows louder, filling the air with a strange, almost eerie noise. Ezekiel watches in awe as the bones begin to move, trembling on the ground. One by one, they start to join together, forming skeletons where once there was only dust and decay. The valley is filled with the rattling of bones, each piece finding its place, reconnecting as if guided by an invisible hand. In this moment, Ezekiel sees the power of God's word in action. What seemed impossible moments before is now unfolding before his eyes. Skeletal forms stand where there was only emptiness, and it is clear that the words of God spoken through his prophet have the power to defy even death. Yet, as incredible as this transformation is, the bodies remain lifeless. Though they have form, they still lack the essence of life. But Ezekiel's obedience has set the stage for something even greater. a display of God's ultimate power and the promise of true restoration. As Ezekiel watches, the transformation continues, layer by layer. What had once been a chaotic scattering of bones has now taken the form of human bodies, a multitude of skeletal figures standing in the valley. But the vision is far from over. God's work is not yet complete. Step by step, the next phase of restoration begins, and Ezekiel stands witness to the miracle unfolding. First, tendons begin to appear, stretching and connecting across the bones, holding them together with sinews of strength and flexibility. Like threads weaving a garment, these tendons bind each part of the skeleton, adding strength and structure to the fragile forms. Next, muscles emerge, covering the tendons and bones, giving the body's shape and substance. What was once lifeless now resembles a figure of strength, a foundation ready to support life. As the final layer, skin begins to cover the muscles, enfolding the entire structure. Layer by layer, these bodies take on a human appearance, each one now whole, fully formed, and standing like silent statues across the valley. The transformation is stunning, almost surreal, as Ezekiel watches these once barren bones take shape into complete human forms. Yet, despite this incredible transformation, something essential is missing. The bodies, though whole and seemingly prepared for life, remain eerily still. There is no breath, no spark, no heartbeat. They stand as silent forms, beautiful but incomplete. Ezekiel realizes that although the bodies are physically restored, they still lack the most vital element, the breath of life. This scene teaches Ezekiel and us that God's work in restoring is often a process. Step by step, piece by piece, He brings order and structure out of chaos. But even after all visible changes have taken place, true life can only come through God's Spirit. And it is in this moment that Ezekiel senses the anticipation of a final, profound act of creation that will transform these lifeless bodies into a living, breathing army. Ezekiel stands in awe, looking across the valley now filled with bodies that are fully formed, yet eerily still. The transformation of bones into bodies has been extraordinary, a process that has taken what seemed utterly lifeless and given it shape and form. But without breath, these bodies remain inanimate, like statues in a field. They are complete in appearance, but they lack the essence of life, the spark that only God can provide. At this moment, God speaks to Ezekiel once more, giving him a new command. Prophecy to the breath. Prophesy, Son of Man, and say to it, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain that they may live. This instruction is different from the first. Now, God is calling on Ezekiel to summon the very breath of life, the spirit that gives true vitality, without which these bodies are still incomplete. The valley may be filled with forms, but without the breath of God, they remain lifeless. Ezekiel takes a deep breath himself, knowing that he is about to witness something extraordinary. Following God's command, he calls to the breath, summoning it from the four winds to fill these bodies with life. His voice echoes through the valley as he speaks, carrying a sense of urgency and anticipation. As he finishes his proclamation, a profound silence fills the air, as if the valley itself is holding its breath, waiting. Then, suddenly, a shift occurs. The breath of life begins to flow through the valley, moving like an invisible wind. Ezekiel watches in amazement as each body begins to stir, chests rising and falling as they take in the breath that animates them. One by one, the lifeless forms start to come alive, their eyes opening, their lungs filling with the air that only God's Spirit can provide. What was once a silent, empty valley is now filled with the sounds of breathing, of movement, of life returning to what had seemed forever lost. In this breathtaking moment, Ezekiel sees the final and most vital step of restoration. God has shown that only His Spirit can bring true life, and without it, no structure, no matter how complete, can truly live. As the valley awakens, Ezekiel realizes that he is witnessing a miracle, a promise that God can bring life to even the most hopeless, desolate situations. The transformation is complete, and Ezekiel is now surrounded by an awe-inspiring sight. What was once a valley of dry, scattered bones has now become a field of life. Before him stands an enormous army, fully formed, breathing, and alive. Bodies that had once been nothing but brittle remnants are now strong, vibrant, and filled with purpose. The valley echoes with the sound of movement, with the stirring of thousands who, moments ago, were nothing more than fragments of the past. Ezekiel stands in amazement, witnessing not only the physical resurrection of these bodies, but a powerful symbol of hope and renewal. What seemed like an impossible scene, lifeless bones rising up to become an army, has unfolded before his eyes. In this moment, he understands that God has not only the power to create, but also to restore, to bring life where there was none, and to revive what once seemed lost forever. The magnitude of what he has witnessed is overwhelming, and he understands the message being conveyed. This miraculous transformation isn't merely for him to witness. It's a powerful message for all of Israel. Just as these bones have been raised up into a mighty army, God intends to raise up His people. The lifelessness and despair that had consumed Israel will not be the final word. Through His power and Spirit, God will restore His people, bring them back from exile, and give them new life, no matter how hopeless their situation seems. As the army stands ready, Ezekiel recognizes that God is showing not only His ability to restore physical bodies, but also His promise to revive spirits, restore hope, and fulfill His covenant with His people. This army is a symbol, a vision of what God can do in the lives of those who feel defeated and lost. The miracle is complete, but its meaning extends beyond this valley. It's a promise for all who believe, a reminder that with God, even the most desolate situations can be transformed into places of strength, purpose, and renewed life. As the vision fades, God speaks to Ezekiel once more, providing the interpretation of what he has just witnessed. "Son of man," God begins, "these bones are the whole house of Israel." The meaning becomes clear. The valley of dry bones is a representation of Israel's current state. A people who have lost all hope, who feel as though they have been cut off from God's promises, as if they were nothing but lifeless remnants of a once thriving nation. God continues, explaining the thoughts of His people. The Israelites are saying, "Our bones are dried up, our hope is lost, we are completely cut off." This sentiment echoes the deepest feelings of despair and abandonment among the exiled people. They feel as if God has turned away, as if their connection to the promises made to their ancestors has been severed, and there is no future for them in this foreign land. But God's message does not end there. With tenderness and power, He reassures them. "Therefore, prophesy and say to them, 'Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I will open your graves and raise you up from your graves, O my people, and I will bring you back to the land of Israel.'" This promise is monumental. Just as God breathed life into the valley of dry bones, He promises to breathe new life into Israel. He will gather His people from exile, restore their hope, and bring them back to their land, to a place of belonging and purpose. In this chapter, the meaning of the vision becomes a personal and collective promise to Israel. God has not forgotten them, nor has He abandoned them to despair. Instead, He is preparing to fulfill His promises in ways that defy human understanding. God's power to restore the physically dead is matched by his power to revive a nation that feels spiritually dead. This is a message of hope, a call to trust that, even in the darkest times, God can bring new life, restoring what seemed forever lost. For Israel, this vision is a reminder of God's unshakable commitment to his people. The dry bones that became a living army represent the future of a restored and revitalized Israel, a people brought back to life by the breath of God, strengthened by his promises, and destined to return to their rightful place. As the story of the Valley of Dry Bones comes to a close, we're left with a powerful truth that transcends time. This vision is not just for the people of Israel in their exile. It is a message of hope and restoration for anyone who has ever felt lost, broken, or beyond redemption. Just as God promised to revive and restore Israel, this story speaks to the possibility of transformation in each of our lives, no matter how lifeless or hopeless things may seem. We all have valleys in our lives, areas that feel desolate, forgotten, or broken beyond repair. These could be relationships strained by conflict, dreams that seem out of reach, struggles with addiction, or personal failures that weigh heavily on us. In these moments, it's easy to feel like those dry bones, scattered and without hope. But the message of Ezekiel's vision is clear. Nothing is beyond the reach of God's restoration. If God can bring an entire valley of dry bones to life, if he can transform remnants into a vast, breathing army, then surely he can breathe life into the places in our lives that feel beyond saving. Like the Israelites, we are reminded that we are never truly cut off from God's presence or his promises. He is capable of renewing our strength, restoring our hope, and bringing us to a place of purpose and wholeness. In this final chapter, the challenge is to open our hearts and allow God's Spirit to breathe new life into us. Just as Ezekiel had to speak words of life over those bones, we too are called to speak hope into our lives, to trust in the possibilities beyond what we can see. God's promise to restore is not limited to a distant past. It is alive and available today for anyone willing to believe. The vision of the Valley of Dry Bones serves as a reminder that God is with us, even in our darkest times. It is an invitation to see beyond our circumstances, to trust that God's power to restore is as real now as it was then. As we allow this message to settle into our hearts, we are reminded that with God, no situation is truly hopeless, and no dream is beyond revival. The same God who raised up an army from dry bones is waiting to breathe new life into us, to lead us out of our valleys, and to bring us into a future filled with hope and purpose. If this message inspired you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need a little encouragement today. Leave a comment below telling us which parts resonated most with you. And if you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on more stories of hope and inspiration. Let's keep building this community together.